The message reached Bumpy Johnson before the footsteps did. 10 men moving quiet. Paid to erase him, certain Harlem would look away. Certain blood would answer first. Oh. Step 2. Chapter breakdown with word distribution. Chapter 1. The inevitable knock. Word spreads in fragments. A warning passed without panic. Bumpy Johnson learns the mob has already decided his fate. No alarms, no rush. Just preparation and silence settling into Harlem. Chapter 2. Harlem knows who holds it. Bumpy Johnson moves through Harlem without spectacle. Shopkeepers watch. Corners listen. Loyalty isn't demanded, it's understood. The neighborhood feels the incoming pressure. But trust the man, who never raises his voice. Chapter 3. The men who were sent. 10 men arrive believing numbers equal power. They misunderstand restraint for weakness. Each step they take deeper into Harlem strips away their certainty, replacing it with something colder than fear. Chapter 4. The public disrespect. The mob's insult isn't private, it's intentional. Bumpy Johnson is challenged in a way meant to humiliate him. The community watches, waiting to see whether violence or principle will speak first. Chapter 5. Calm domination. No gunshots announce the turning point. No shouting. Control reveals itself quietly. Decisions are made. Lines are crossed only once. Power settles back into the room without needing to prove itself. Chapter 6. The warning that came back. 2 men return carrying more than fear. The message they deliver reshapes boundaries. Harlem breathes again. Bumpy Johnson's legacy hardens, not as a killer, but as something far more dangerous. The knock never comes all at once. It arrives in pieces. A look held too long. A voice lowered halfway through a sentence. A street that goes quiet a second earlier than it should. Bumpy Johnson notices all of it. He sits where he always sits. Same chair, same view. Harlem doesn't rush him, and he doesn't rush Harlem. A man brings word without asking to be heard. 10 men, paid, already moving. The kind of information meant to spark panic. It doesn't. Bumpy listens without interruption. His hands are still. His face gives nothing away. When the man finishes speaking, the silence stretches just long enough to let the truth settle. The mob hasn't sent a warning. They've sent a conclusion. Bumpy stands, slow, deliberate, not to leave, just to remind the room he's present. He looks out at the street, at people who don't know they're standing in the shadow of a decision, already made somewhere far from them. This isn't new. Pressure has found him before. What's different is the arrogance. 10 men means they think Harlem belongs to numbers now. That belief offends him more than the threat itself. He gives instructions quietly, not commands. Requests spoken with certainty. Each word lands where it needs to. No wasted motion, no raised voice. The room understands. Outside, life keeps moving. Inside, the air changes, not with fear but with readiness. Harlem has heard worse storms. It has learned which ones pass and which ones break. Bumpy Johnson remains where he is. Waiting isn't weakness, it's ownership. And whatever is coming next will have to enter on his terms. That understanding kept him alive longer than enemies ever expect. Harlem knows who holds it. Harlem doesn't announce its loyalty. It shows it in smaller ways. Doors left unlocked. Lights left on. People staying exactly where they are when trouble is supposed to scatter them. Bumpy Johnson walks its streets and nothing shifts to make room. It already has. He moves without escort. Not because he lacks protection, but because presence does more than muscle ever could. Men nod without smiling. Women pause mid-conversation just long enough to acknowledge him. No one stares. Staring is for tourists and fools. The word is already moving ahead of him. Not shouted. Passed hand to hand like a folded note. Something's coming. Something serious. And yet no one runs. Harlem has learned the difference between chaos and control. Bumpy stops outside a shop. Exchanges a few words that sound ordinary. They aren't. He asks about family. About business. About a boy who needs work. Every question is a thread. Every answer tightens the fabric holding the block together. This is how power stays quiet. Not through fear, but through obligation. Bumpy Johnson doesn't own Harlem. He carries it. That's why it carries him back. A car idles too long at the corner. New plates. Wrong posture. Bumpy notices. He doesn't react. Reaction gives men courage they haven't earned. Instead, he keeps walking. The car moves on, uncertain. Uncertainty is contagious. Inside a back room, decisions are made without ceremony. Who stays home? Who keeps watch? Who doesn't need to be told anything at all? No one asks what happens if things go bad. They already know who will handle that part. The mob believes Harlem is territory. Bumpy knows it's a living thing. Territory can be taken. People have to be turned, and that takes time the mob no longer has. By the time night settles, Harlem is alert without being loud. Prepared without being tense. A city holding its breath, not out of fear but respect. Whatever walks in next won't find chaos waiting. It will find order, and order is harder to kill than any man. The men who were sent. They arrive separately. That's the first mistake. 10 men believing distance makes them invisible. Believing Harlem won't notice the way they don't belong. Shoes too clean. Eyes too busy. Hands never quite relaxed. They were told this would be quick. A walk in, a correction, a walk out. Numbers give them confidence. Numbers always do, until they stop meaning anything. Harlem watches them without looking. That's how it's done here. Reflections in windows. Conversations that pause at the wrong moment. A door closing a second too late. The men feel it but can't name it. They mistake awareness for fear. One of them laughs, quietly, just enough to steady himself. Another checks his watch like time is on his side. They don't know the neighborhood already knows their rhythm. Already knows who walks fast when nervous. Who touches his coat too often. They expected resistance, maybe a guard, maybe a warning shot. What they get instead is space. Too much of it. Streets that open up instead of tightening. Corners that offer no cover. Silence that doesn't explain itself. A man approaches them, not threatening, not careful, just present. He asks a question that sounds harmless. Where they're headed. They answer wrong. Not the words, the tone. The conversation ends without conclusion, but something has shifted. One by one, confidence begins to thin. Not fear yet, something worse. Doubt. Doubt makes men improvise. Improvisation breaks plans. They realize too late that no one is blocking their path because no one needs to. Every move they make is already known. Every direction accounted for. Harlem isn't circling them. It's letting them pass through layers they don't understand. Some of them sense it, some don't. One suggests leaving. Another reminds him who's paying. Pride wins the argument. Pride usually does. Somewhere nearby, Bumpy Johnson is informed without interruption. No reaction, just acknowledgement. The kind that tells everyone else the weight is being handled. The men keep moving. Deeper now. Past the point where backing out would feel like failure. They still believe they're hunting a man. They don't realize they've already been received. The public disrespect. The insult is delivered without a gunshot. That's what makes it louder. A message passed openly, carelessly, meant to be seen, meant to travel. The mob doesn't whisper this time. They want Harlem to hear it breathe. The men step into a place where faces are known. A place where names matter. They don't hide. They sit. They order. They let their presence announce itself like a challenge left on a table. This isn't an ambush. It's theater. Word spreads fast now because it's meant to. People pause mid-step. Conversations fade. No one interferes. Everyone understands what's being tested. Not Bumpy Johnson's temper, but his restraint. A voice carries just enough. A remark lands sideways, not a threat. Something worse. A dismissal. A suggestion that power has shifted. That 10 men can walk in and speak carelessly where silence used to live. Bumpy Johnson arrives without urgency. He doesn't scan the room. Doesn't measure exits. He takes his place as if it was reserved long before anyone else arrived. The men look at him and feel taller for a moment. Numbers do that. He listens. That unsettles them. They expected something else. A warning, a glare, a raised voice. Instead, they get patience. Patience forces men to reveal themselves. One of them pushes, just enough to be noticed. He talks about territory like it's paper on a desk. About outcomes like they're already decided. The room tightens, not with fear, with offense. Bumpy lets the words fall where they land. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't correct. He waits until silence asks him to speak. When he does, it's calm, almost conversational. He doesn't argue ownership. He doesn't defend his name. He asks a simple question that reframes everything. Who told you that? The answer doesn't matter. The hesitation does. The men realize too late that this isn't about killing anyone. It's about whether they'll be allowed to leave as they are. Pride stiffens. Pride always arrives before regret. Around them, Harlem remains still. No weapons drawn. No allies stepping forward. Just presence. The kind that reminds you how many eyes are weighing your next move. Bumpy stands, not abruptly, deliberately. The room adjusts to him. Chairs scrape softly. Breaths shorten. The men feel smaller now, not because of force, but because of certainty. This wasn't meant to be public. That's the mistake. Disrespect works in private. In public, it demands an answer that travels farther than violence ever could. Bumpy gives them one without raising his voice. A boundary stated once. A consequence implied, not promised. He doesn't need to explain what happens next. The men understand. Some of them too late. Outside, Harlem exhales. Inside, the room stays quiet long after footsteps move away. Everyone knows something has shifted back into place. The insult has been answered. Calm domination. No shots mark the moment. No bodies announce it. Power doesn't need witnesses when it's certain of itself. Bumpy Johnson doesn't chase the men. He doesn't rush them out. He allows them to understand where they are standing. That understanding does the work. One of them speaks again, softer now. Tries to regain footing. Bumpy answers with fewer words than before. Each one lands heavier. Not because it threatens, but because it closes doors. He gestures once, not a signal, a decision. The room responds without noise. Paths open, paths close. Men are separated not by force, but by inevitability. Harlem doesn't surround them. It defines the limits of their movement. This is where violence could happen. Everyone feels it. The air is thin with it, but violence would be wasteful. Violence would make this temporary. Bumpy steps closer, not into their space, into their future. He speaks calmly about choices, about exits, about how certain lines once crossed don't need to be crossed again. Some men understand restraint as mercy. They are wrong. Restraint is control, and control doesn't hurry. Two of them are given permission to leave, not because they earned it, but because they're useful alive. The others are denied nothing. That's what frightens them most. There are no screams, no pleas, just the quiet sound of certainty settling. What happens next is efficient, private, undramatic. Harlem doesn't need to see it. The men who remain learn something important. They learn that reputation is heavier than muscle, and silence travels farther than bullets. They learn that Bumpy Johnson does not need to raise his hand to end a conversation. When the two men step back onto the street, they are changed. Not injured, not chased, just corrected. They carry something heavier than fear, clarity. Behind them, the room resets itself. Chairs return. Glasses are filled. Conversation resumes at a respectful distance. Order has been restored without spectacle. Bumpy Johnson remains standing a moment longer. He looks around, not to confirm loyalty, but to acknowledge it. Harlem meets his gaze without flinching. This wasn't a victory. Victories end. This was maintenance, a reminder that power, when calm, doesn't announce itself. It simply remains. Those who witnessed it will speak later, carefully. Not about what they saw, but about what they felt. The absence of chaos, the weight of order returning. That is how legends grow, quietly, in rooms where nothing appears to happen and everything does. By morning, the story will already be shorter than the truth. And that suits Bumpy Johnson just fine. The fewer details spoken aloud, the longer the lesson lasts. Carried forward by memory instead of noise, alone, intact. The warning that came back. Two men walk back into a world that no longer feels familiar. They were sent with certainty. They return with instruction. Not orders shouted, but boundaries etched into memory. They don't embellish the story. They don't need to. The look on their faces carries more weight than details ever could. When they speak to their employers, the room listens differently. Power has been redefined. The warning is simple. Harlem is not open ground. Bumpy Johnson is not a problem to be solved. He is a condition to be respected. The mob hears it, even if they don't accept it yet. In Harlem, life resumes without celebration. Stores open. Kids run the sidewalks. Men argue over small things again. That's the victory. Stability returning without blood in the streets. Bumpy doesn't mark the night. He doesn't replay it. Legacy is built by what you refuse to repeat. He knows that tomorrow will bring new pressures, new tests dressed as opportunities. What matters is what didn't happen. 10 men were sent to end something. They failed because they misunderstood the kind of power standing in front of them. Loud power demands proof. Quiet power demands memory. The community remembers. They remember who held the line without turning the neighborhood into a battlefield. They remember who chose restraint when violence would have been easier. Years from now, the story will be told shorter than it deserves. 2 men came back. A warning was delivered. Harlem stayed standing. Bumpy Johnson remained. That's how legacy works. Not in headlines, in the space where order survives, in the calm that follows danger without celebrating it. The mob moves on. Harlem doesn't, and as long as it stands, the lesson stands with it. Power earned. Through restraint lasts longer than fear ever could. That is the inheritance Bumpy Johnson leaves behind. Written quietly in streets that remember. Who protected them without demanding anything back. When violence waited nearby,